Hey Diane, have you looked at your property tax bill lately? Because honestly, every time I open that envelope, I feel like I need to sit down. It's just wild, isn't it?
Shawn, you're not alone. It's like a universal North Carolina homeowner experience. My heart rate definitely spikes a little. And it's not just a small bump. These reassessments, especially in the last few years, have been pretty dramatic for a lot of people.
Exactly. I mean, you buy a home, you think you have a handle on your expenses, and then boom, you get hit with a reassessment that adds hundreds, sometimes thousands, to your annual bill. It makes you wonder, what's the long-term plan for affordability here?
Well, that's actually why there's been so much buzz lately around the General Assembly. There's a serious push, especially in the House, to do something about this. We're talking about a potential constitutional amendment that would cap how much property taxes can increase each year.
A constitutional amendment? Wow, that's a big deal. So not just a legislative change, but something that would actually require a statewide vote, right? What exactly are they proposing?
That's right. It would go to the voters. The core idea is to cap annual property tax increases on your primary residence, so the home you live in. The proposed cap would be either 3% or the rate of inflation, whichever is lower. That's a pretty significant distinction, by the way, especially in times when inflation is higher.
Okay, 3% or inflation, whichever is lower. That sounds like it would offer some real protection, because even 3% compounding can add up over time, but it's a lot more manageable than a sudden 20 or 30% jump after a reassessment.
Precisely. And it's really aimed at helping those who are most vulnerable to these sudden spikes, like older adults, people on fixed incomes, or just anyone who's lived in their home for a long time and has seen the value skyrocket, but their income hasn't kept pace. Imagine being retired on a fixed income, and suddenly your property tax bill doubles. It could literally force people out of their homes.
That's a terrifying thought. You've paid off your mortgage, you think you're set, and then the taxes become the new mortgage. So it's about providing stability for long-term homeowners. But what about new construction or when a property changes hands? Does the cap apply there?
Good question. No, it wouldn't. The cap would specifically exempt newly built property or property that changes ownership. So if you sell your home, the new owner would pay taxes based on the current market value, and then their increases would be capped from there. It's not meant to freeze values indefinitely, just to slow the annual growth for existing homeowners.
That makes sense. It tries to balance the need for revenue with homeowner protection, because if it froze everything, local governments would really struggle. But this sounds similar to what some other states have, right? I'm thinking of California's Proposition 13.
You're absolutely right to make that connection, Shawn. California's Prop 13 is probably the most famous example, capping increases at 2% and resetting when a property sells. South Carolina also has a 4% cap on increases for primary residences. So North Carolina wouldn't be venturing into completely uncharted territory here.
And how has that worked out for those states? Because on the surface, it sounds fantastic for homeowners, but there's always a flip side, isn't there?
There definitely is a flip side, and it's a major point of contention in this debate. Property taxes are the lifeblood of local governments. They fund our schools, our police and fire departments, public parks, libraries, infrastructure projects, basically everything that makes our communities function and thrive. Critics of these caps, and even some local government officials, worry about the impact on revenue.
That's a huge concern. If the revenue growth is capped, especially in rapidly growing areas like much of North Carolina, how do they keep up with the demand for services? More people mean more kids in schools, more roads to maintain, more emergency calls. It's a classic balancing act.
Exactly. They argue that if tax revenue growth slows, they might have to cut services, or they might have to look for other revenue streams, which could mean new fees or different taxes. Or they might just have to raise the overall tax rate more often, which could still hit everyone, even those with capped increases eventually.
So it's not a magic bullet then. It's solving one problem but potentially creating another. It makes you think about the ripple effect. If schools don't get enough funding, for example, that impacts the quality of education, which then affects property values in the long run anyway. It's all interconnected.
Completely. And the property reassessment cycle itself is a big part of the issue. Counties in North Carolina reassess property values every 4 to 8 years. And when you're in a period of high growth, those jumps can be truly eye-watering, as we discussed. A cap would smooth out those shocks.
I remember one reassessment where my property value went up like 30% in one go. My jaw just dropped. You think, oh, great, my house is worth more. But then you remember what that means for your tax bill. It's a bittersweet moment for sure.
Been there, felt that. So the proponents of this amendment really emphasize that it's about predictability and fairness for homeowners, preventing them from being taxed out of their homes. They argue that local governments can still plan and adjust, perhaps with more conservative budgeting or by growing the tax base through new development.
That's a fair point. If you know you have a cap, you budget differently. It might force more fiscal discipline on local governments, perhaps, and new development would still contribute at full market value, so that revenue stream isn't completely cut off.
Exactly, but it's a tightrope walk. What's interesting is how quickly this bill has moved through the House committees. It passed a House committee and is now heading to the House Finance Committee. That tells you there's significant momentum and support for this idea among legislators, at least in the House.
So if it passes the full House and Senate, then it goes to a statewide referendum. That means we, the voters, would get the final say. It puts the ball in our court, which is a powerful thing, but also a huge responsibility to understand all the implications.
Absolutely. It's not just about, do I want lower taxes? It's about, what are the trade-offs for my community? Do we prioritize absolute stability for homeowners, or do we prioritize ensuring robust funding for local services that support growth and quality of life? It's a complex question, and there's no easy answer.
I can see both sides. As a homeowner, especially one who plans to live in North Carolina for the long haul, the idea of predictable, capped increases is incredibly appealing. It brings a sense of security that you don't have right now with those big reassessment jumps.
Right? Imagine planning your retirement budget, knowing that your property tax burden won't suddenly skyrocket by 20% overnight. That peace of mind is invaluable for many.
But then I think about our schools. My kids are in public schools, and I know how much they rely on that local funding. If capping taxes means fewer resources for teachers, for facilities, for programs, that's a tough pill to swallow.
It truly is. And that's the core of the debate, really. How do we find that sweet spot? Are there other ways to support homeowners without potentially starving local services? Some might suggest targeted relief programs instead of a broad cap, or adjustments to state funding formulas.
That's a good point. Maybe a cap isn't the only solution, just the most direct one being proposed right now. It definitely puts the spotlight on the need for transparent conversations about how our local governments are funded and how those funds are spent.
Absolutely. And it forces us to consider the long-term vision for North Carolina. Do we want to be a state where homeownership is stable and protected, even if it means rethinking how we fund our public services? Or do we continue with the current system, where property values often outpace incomes, creating financial strain for many?
It's a huge question, and one that resonates deeply with almost every homeowner and taxpayer in the state. I guess we'll have to keep a close eye on this as it moves through the legislature. If it makes it to a ballot, we'll all have a critical decision to make.
We absolutely will. And I think the key takeaway for listeners is to really dig into the details, understand both the benefits and the potential drawbacks, and be ready to make an informed choice. Our property taxes aren't just a bill. They're an investment in our communities, and how they're managed affects us all.
Couldn't agree more, Dianne. This has been a super insightful discussion on a really important topic for North Carolina. Thanks for breaking it down for us.
My pleasure, Shawn. And to all our listeners, stay informed, and we'll catch you next time.